What's up, everybody? If you all could share this, that would be absolutely fantastic. Let's see. Yeah. If you all could share this, that would be great. If you're on Twitter, please, for the love of God, tag Candace Owens in this video, in this stream right now. Please. If you're on Facebook, you follow her there. Tag Candace Owens in this video. Please. I'm begging you. I've talked about Candace Owens a lot. Well, not a lot. Usually people, when they say, how do you feel about Candace Owens? They never get a good response out of me for obvious reasons. I've said things that were not untrue, but for myself personally, I actually try, whenever I make a comment about any human being, right? It's hard for me to ever get to the point where I can say I hate that person, because I've taught myself over time through life experience that the human experience is a very, very brutal and cruel teacher. And just like taking, your SAT or your final exams, getting an A, the difference between getting an A on an exam and a C on an exam in something like math or even English is having a teacher that is good enough to teach you the fundamentals for you to develop appropriately along the way, so that whenever they aren't there to give you the answers, if they aren't there to review your work, then you know how to teach yourself. You can check yourself, right? Like when you're learning simple algebra, you guess and check. You 7 minus x equals 4. 7 minus 3 equals 4. Well, how do you know that? You go back around. What's 3 plus 4? You learn little checks like that throughout grade school, throughout college, and in real life, you learn the same things. But the problem is, what happens in school, for example, if you had a teacher that let you slide without having to check your work. My teachers, I was very fortunate in middle school and in high school to have pretty damn good teachers. A few issues with a few of them, but pretty damn good teachers. My math teachers specifically would never allow me to turn in my math homework without showing how I got my answer, and even showing that you checked to make sure you got the right answer. My AP literature teacher, she would never just allow us to give an answer without us having to then subsequently explain how we got the answer, why we feel that way. And at UNC, Chapel Hill, I had a political science professor, to this day, probably one of the most fascinating minds that I have ever encountered in the world of academia. Everything he talked about everything he said was a question, never an assertion. He would say, well, is nuclear proliferation good or bad? Somebody would say, well, it's great. Well, why? Well, because we haven't had any war. Oh, we haven't? Well, we haven't had nuclear war. Oh, we haven't? Well, how do you know that? That's literally what he would do. And then he would say, well, who feels that it's nuclear proliferation is a horrible thing? Oh, absolutely, professor. I think nuclear proliferation is horrible. Well, why is that? Or how do you know if we, and he would say things like, well, have we had a nuclear war since nuclear proliferation has started? People would then be forced to do research and figure out why their answer made sense, or if it made sense at all. Surprisingly enough, a lot of them didn't make sense, but that's a different discussion. Why am I saying this and giving you these anecdotal stories regarding Candace Owens? Because just like with school, education, in life, along the way you get teachers, if you're lucky enough, that help you rationalize the events that happen to you and the events that happen to the people around you. For example, when I used to do debate in high school, I was not the most polished as far as my behavior was concerned. I didn't necessarily act out, but I was a live one. I was very opinionated. I did not really take trash from anybody, and I had a serious problem with male authority. But now that I am an adult, I understand that has a lot to do with the fact that, one, I did prefer female authority because of how close I was with my mother and how much I respected her, but also because of the fact that my dad wasn't in my life and I did not like my dad. So historically, both my brother and I have always had significant issues with male authority, even to the degree that it affected my military career and still affects my brother's military career to this very day. For the most part, he really mostly gets along with the female leadership and not the male leadership. There's a lot more that goes into that, but so my debate coach understood this. Obviously, he never talked to me about it. Not at the time. I was way too young to understand that type of stuff. But so instead of heckling me, attacking me, suspending me, jumping on the bandwagon that had been formed my freshman year of upperclassmen and even some of the debate coaches, just attacking me, calling me immature, saying I was never going to be a good debater, all kinds of stuff. He would hold me accountable where it needed to be held accountable. He would also defend me out loud where he believed that I was being attacked wrongfully and that people were just being petty and vindictive. He would bring me into the back office and ask me, well, why did you think that was okay? Do you know better than that? Should you have done things a little bit differently? So over time, obviously I was listening to him. And over time, that not only shaped the way, obviously, I carried myself as a debater, which in the event that I was doing, which was student congress, the way you carried yourself, the conversations you had, and the way you interacted with people was actually part of the criteria that they graded you on. But it also helped me when it came to understanding our limitations as people. And that is, as people, not just myself, not just Candace Owens, not just Bernie Sanders, not Donald Trump, maybe Hillary Clinton, but as people, every single one of us are limited by our experiences. All of us. I often tell the story about how my brother turned a racist from nowhere, Alabama, that is still living in the prohibition era, as in you cannot buy alcohol there. He turned him from being that into, well, what the hell? Why do y'all, like, talking to his family, like, why do you all hate black people? I'm kind of confused by this, to the point where he doesn't even talk to his family anymore. Why? Because he met my brother. He finally met a black person. I know, it's insane. And Royce and I still talk regularly. He's on the MCSC network with Let's Talk Nonsense, and he actually tells that story. We laugh about it all the time. But Royce was racist. His last name is Harrison. He's part of one of the richest slave-owning families in the country during the Civil War era. They helped to fund the Civil War for the South. But he never met a black person outside of television. That's the first time he had seen a black person up close. So his experience with black people is everything we know that Hollywood profiles black men and women as. Then the comments and commentary of his friends and family and acquaintances in the small town that he lives in that also doesn't really have black people. And the stereotypes that are surrounded by being black. That's all he ever known until he met one. And then he met more because of my brother. And then he realized, oh wow, I was being an idiot. It happens to the best of us. I would have considered myself a libertarian at one point in my life. Probably in high school, maybe a little bit after high school. Because I had all the facts and the evidence, but I did not have perspective and experience. Now, how does this logic apply to Candace Owens? Well, Candace Owens, people, by her own admission, had two significant life events happen to her, and she kept bringing them up over and over again. And you can tell that they both had a profound impact on the way she looks at and views life, but also, and I think what's probably more important, is that it reveals a huge gaping hole in her ability to rationalize her emotions. She shows a serious lack of emotional intelligence. So the first instance that happened to her was that while she was hanging out with her boyfriend in high school, some kids got mad. Apparently it was a gay guy that she used to be really good friends with. They called her and said things like, nigger this, nigger that, nigger. We're going to tar and feather your family. We're going to shoot you in the back of the head like we did Martin Luther King. This was what was said to her because apparently she was not hanging out with somebody. Now, the youngest kid was 14, which actually turned out to be a governor's son or a mayor's son. So the FBI had to get involved. But the oldest was not 14. It was like 17, 18 years old. Now, are those kids racist? No. Well, I don't know them. So I'll put it like that. I don't know them personally. So I can't say that everything they do is racist. But nonetheless, somebody can not be racist and still practice in different ways and forms racism all the time. People do it sometimes unwittingly so. The world has come a long way, and a lot of people can acknowledge this. But at the same time, especially at that time, a lot of people can do kind of somewhat racist stuff and not realize it. But that was malicious. It was a prank call. She was 17 years old. And what was scary about listening to her talk about that experience, she said, well, the first time that I was a victim of a hate crime, I was like, and this is on the Joe Rogan Experience, and I urge you all to watch that interview. You know what she said? She literally put that in quote. She said, a victim of a hate crime. And he's like, Joe Rogan, It was like, whoa, wait, what do you mean? Why do you put victim in quotations? What was it, a hate crime? Well, yeah, they called me all this stuff and said the thing about Martin Luther King, and yeah, they really did say that to me. And so, Joe Rogan, like myself, thought like, no, that would make you a victim. That would literally make you a victim of a hate crime. Whether or not that person is racist is a different discussion, but that comment was or that phone call was directed towards you, and it involved a bunch of racial slurs and a clearly racially charged threat. That would be a hate crime. You are, by the definition of the word victim, you are a victim of a hate crime. But she immediately, before she even went into her story, like, she started off by saying, well, I just hate the word victim. I hate the word victim. I hate it. That is what I would call, I'm not obviously a psychiatrist or a psychologist, but I am a people person, and I do like to take the time to listen to people, and you start seeing these patterns. And that is what I would call projection. She said, I hate victim. What she means to say is, based off of the rest of the commentaries, that she hates being the victim. As in, she literally hates being in a position where she does not have control. She despises so much that in that situation, do you know what she said? I just felt so bad for these kids because here they are facing the consequences for the actions, and they're so young. They're so young. And, the youngest one was 14, but the oldest one was like 18. And they knew what they were saying. And they said that in a way that you would take it as if the person calling you was racist, because they knew that a racially charged statement would affect you because you're black, because of your race. And the area that she lived in was like 13% black. Well, different census say different things. I've read 5 and I've read 13. I'll go with 13. But Connecticut is not, it's kind of like the outskirts. This is in Stamford, Connecticut, which is kind of like Fayetteville, where we have a lot of black people, but Fayetteville, North Carolina, North Carolina in general, really, you have a lot of black people in certain pockets of the state. But if the right white person with the right accent calls your phone and makes a threat like that, you legitimately fear for your life. You have an issue at that point. So, but she actually starts talking about how bad she felt for them. They threatened her life, and granted, it was a prank. They wanted her to feel like her life was threatened, and she felt bad for them. It's really, really weird. But that is what I would call a projection, because what she says subsequently is the biggest clue. I went through anorexia because of that. I stopped eating because of that. And she says it was because I felt like I didn't have control. I had no control over the situation. I had no control over the outcome of their lives, and I had no control over the outcome of mine. Now, what she does not talk about in the Joe Rogan interview is the fact that she won a $37,000 settlement from that by the school board. So she leaves that part out. So essentially, she profited off of the hate crime that she says that it's very outrage. Never mind. That's when I'm gonna talk about that, because she didn't renounce the money. She didn't give it back. She has enough money to give it back now, since she strongly believes that wasn't a hate crime and that she wasn't a victim. But she literally kind of like, she does this thing whenever she's touching something that's sensitive to her emotionally. She kind of like cringes and like, oh, I hate being called a victim. I hate it, because she was a victim. That was a serious ordeal. The FBI got involved because the politician's kid was involved. So people were saying that she was lying. All the white mothers, that is like it's a thing. Like, their kid can never be wrong. Black people, actually, we joke about it all the time in high school. Not gonna lie to you. Not my Jimmy. Tommy would never do something like that. Yeah, you know what I'm talking about. Like Tina, Tina, the one who calls the manager all the time. That's also Tommy's mom at school. Pretty much same persona. But they were blaming her. They were saying that she was lying. That she was looking for attention. So they did the victim blaming thing. And what is it that we know about abusive relationships? Well, if I would have just, listened to what Johnny said, then he wouldn't have hit me. If I wouldn't have wore that skirt, and asked for it, then maybe I wouldn't have been sexually assaulted. I feel really bad for him though, because he has issues. I know it, and if I can just reach out to him, yeah, that's what trauma and abuse does to people. Stockholm syndrome, if you will. So, fast forward, she still considers herself a liberal. In fact, she considered herself a liberal all the way until 2016 in April, where very soon after that, weirdly enough, she writes this article. After she had become a liberal blogger, she was extremely anti-Trump, not like a little bit, extremely anti-Trump for all of 2015 and all the way up until April of 2016. So, conveniently right before the election, but more so, conveniently, when she got a white boyfriend who belonged to a country club who she described as the stereotypical sitcom white boy who wears polos and khaki shorts. And yeah, this is by her words, not mine. In this same article, because I joke with people all the time. I said, I know what kind of person Candace Owens is. She was not accepted because she was either really smart or she was kind of kept in a bubble because probably somebody in her past did wrong. Her parents tried to overcompensate, therefore excluding her from a lot of the black culture, if you will. And so it was hard for her to communicate with kids, and it was hard for them to communicate and understand why she was always in the books and things like that, because that's not really integral in black culture, and it's coming from someone who was raised in it. And it was true. She says it herself. In middle school, she was always called, saying that she wanted to be white. That's what black kids used to say about her. High school, same thing. She dated white boys. So this is something that's non-unique to Candace. The group that we are not accepted by in our youth, when we're coming into our adulthood, that's oftentimes the group that we yearn to be accepted by. So, yeah, black people didn't really like her that much. But also, white people, she was kind of kept around, but it's not the same thing as being accepted by the people that you would love, like the people who look like you. Or depending on depending on the school that you belong to, that's a big, your school, your area, the place that you live, that's a huge factor as well. So, a popular example I use for this, and by the way, don't take it personal. These are just observations and patterns that I've seen. Desi and Arab women, but more specifically Desi women and Indian women, that they're Desi. In college, I would see always dating frat kind of white boys. Some Asian women too. And I never really thought anything of it, but until you would start seeing them finish college, and it was the same exact thing happening. They were no longer together, and the guy would go on to date someone who was kind of I don't want to say stereotypical white girl, but in North Carolina, they wore the cowboy boots with the little dresses and kind of like sorority girls. That's the one that I always say you can bring home to your family. Now, understand something. I was in middle school during 9/11. So that whole time, there was a lot of stigma towards anyone who resembled the stereotype of being a Muslim, whether it be male or female, but specifically females, because of the stigma that had, you know, subsequently been attached to the burqa, the hijab, the you know, the niqabs, which were the entire outfits. So they weren't really accepted. They were accepted, but there was a lot of jokes, mostly told by white people. There were a lot of racial comments, a lot of exclusion, because that's unfortunately what stereotypes do. But when I got to college, I saw it was like this really weird thing where they were like hunting for white guys in the clubs or at the bar scenes. They were subjecting themselves to horrible relationships and making excuses for it, because that was the group they wanted to be accepted into. Now, understand something too, with Desi women specifically, they're kind of taught that, like, being with, like, Indians, for example, they're taught, like, being with the white boys, like, the shit. And, like, the men also are taught that being with the white woman is, like, the shit, because of the colonialism that's taking place in India. Same thing with China. So understand, people like when you're part of the out group, or when you're feeling excluded, you oftentimes feel like a yearn to be part of that group. Now, this is coming from someone like myself, who, although I had a very similar experience to Candace Owens, not necessarily in middle school, but in high school, because of just the activities that I chose to be a part of. I was in debate. I played soccer. I didn't play football. I went to Korean church, so I hung out with a lot of Koreans all the time. You know, I tried to stray away from a lot of the things that I used to do when I was younger. And so because of that, I wasn't really as communicative with my black friends as I had once been. Not because I didn't like them. We played basketball together still, but we just didn't hang out together anymore. So, but luckily over time, me separating myself from things that I had once only known and exploring and experiencing things that I had never experienced, cultures that I had never experienced, being adopted by a white family after leaving a single parent household when I was in high school, which is an extremely unique experience, being at a community college and simultaneously, or not simultaneously, but subsequently going to a top 5 school in the country, being poor, being well off, and then being poor again, being a libertarian at some point in my high school career, and then evolving into, I don't even know what you would call me now. I just call myself progressive simply because I believe in progress. All of those experiences helped give me a very, very unique look on life. One that can't be determined by a D or an R in front of my name. One that can't be codified by, oh, you're right wing, you're conservative, or you're liberal. You know, like, that's what experiences do, though. And a lot of the country, the more experience that we have been engaging in, because the world is just way different now, right? We have much more access to travel, different cultures, a lot more research, context behind statistics. A lot of those experiences are what make independence truly independent. Because in a lot of ways, you're independent in your experience, and therefore you're independent in your thought. But once again, what happens when you're limited by these experiences, or you do not have the people in your life or the people around you to help you understand and rationalize the experiences you have? Because Candace Owens had another life-changing experience that she harped on during the Joe Rogan conversation, which is that she actually was attacked by the New York Times, pretty much by all the establishment wings of journalism, because she called out someone from the establishment, from like the left establishment, and it turned into a hell, like a shitstorm. It was bad. She was attacked by all of the liberal outlets that she had once believed in and thought would fight for her, because she was trying to start a website for anti-bullying. Granted, it was just one big doxing website. That's what she wanted to start. But some wording she had used in the website's description while she was doing Kickstarter made it seem like she was going to be able to unveil bots. Now, I should tell Candace Owens this. You triggered the person that you triggered, and when she said that you were going to ruin everything, she probably was talking about herself. I'll give you that. But probably also this was in the midst of 2015, 2016, right? I think 2015, 2016. While Media Matters, David Brock and all those bots had started coming out. And that's why she specifically said, if you come out with this website and you move forward with it, you will be attacked, and you were subsequently attacked by a bunch of Trump supporters. That's how she was able to predict it, because despite popular belief, bots were primarily used by the establishment left rather than the establishment right. They didn't need to. Trump was ridiculously popular. I mean, just be honest. So, and that's what she said was the turning point. That was it for her. That's her words, not mine. So instead of, because I'm sure a lot of you, I don't know, maybe not all of you, you know what the Hegelian dialectic is, which is that the theory that the human mind can only dichotomize things in very polarizing, that's the only way they're going to understand anything, or that the human mind can understand anything, by polarizing everything. It has to be this, or it absolutely must be this. One of the largest logical fallacies known to mankind. So that's what she did. She said, I thought they were on my side, so if they're not on my side, that means everyone on the left is an enemy to me. But everyone on the right is my friend now, because Mike Cernovich reached out to me, because these Fox News and all these left, these this is her words, not mine. She literally said, I thought I loved the left, and then people like Mike Cernovich, who people say were white supremacists, and all these other super right wing people reached out to her, which because she admits she hadn't been involved in politics at all, right? Hadn't been involved in politics at all, but Turning Point USA, which is supposed to be a nonprofit, which is right-wing, Koch-funded propaganda, hired her to be a communications director, which has a lot of controversy surrounding that as well. You weren't involved in politics at all until April 2016. And now you're the communications director for a conservative PAC or nonprofit that, hold up. So a year, now it's a little bit over 2 years. Well, I think it's about 2 years, maybe a year and a half, 2 years. So, but before she got hired in November 2017, a year before that, she wasn't even involved in politics. But Turning Point USA thought that she would be the perfect person to be the communications director for a conservative nonprofit. Do you know what the front of their website says? It says, support the Black Outreach Fund. What? Bro, just no. And then the worst part is she calls Charlie Kirk. Once again, this is kind of emblematic of the lack of people who have actually sat down with her and helped her rationalize her experiences and frame them correctly so that she knows things weren't her fault. Because once again, that situation where she was going to start that anti-bullying website, which, like I said, for all intents and purposes was a professional doxing portfolio for high schoolers. That's what she said. Well, we're just putting them in timeout. That's all. But bullying, online bullying, is a soft spot for her. All of a sudden, now it's kind of like, oh, like she gets rational again. Like this shouldn't happen because these are the results in XYZ, which I agree with. But that experience did not guess who reached out to her? She went for the first people who patted her on the back after never being involved in politics. So after never being involved in politics, you all of a sudden decide you understand everything about it. After never being a sociologist or dabbling in sociology, now you know everything about the black community and its struggles. But here's something curious. Prison reform, well, not necessarily prison reform, but she was against the crime bill. And she was very passionate about why she was against Hillary Clinton. She was very passionate about it. And Bill Clinton as well. And it was very much so, amongst other things, mostly about that crime bill. But she also talks about, very deeply so, not only in her videos, in that video, in her videos, and in her writing, about her uncles, who are all victims of the prison industrial complex. And she speaks very glowingly of Kim Kardashian for wanting to address that. And so that's usually not a talking point for the right, but for Candace Owens, she has a strong emotional connection to her uncles because she talks about it pretty frequently, and her cousins who are fathered by her uncles. She has a deep connection to them. So in her mind, that's different though. Prison industrial complex is different. I mimic every right-wing talking point except for the ones that affect me personally or that I'm emotionally invested in. I'll give you another example of her just wanting to fit in. She was like, I've been drinking, since I was 14. I just decided I'm not a drinker. I don't drink. Oh, when did you make this decision? November of 2017. When you got hired by Turning Point USA. That's not your decision. It's what you think. It's what you think you should represent as a conservative, like a Christian conservative. Get my point, people? And so I really hope this message reaches Candace because I need her to understand she's being used. There's no other way to put it. She's being used. You're being made a fool of. And I'm curious to know, because if you don't know what Turning Point USA is, right? It was started by Charlie Kirk. You know what Charlie Kirk is? Charlie Kirk is such an egotist. He has so much hubris that he has declared that all college campuses are just mini totalitarian, like, clusterfucks. Like that. That's all they get off on. It's like he literally described them as totalitarian dictatorships. All college campuses. I want you to understand something, people. Charlie Kirk has never been to college. Not once. Charlie Kirk did not graduate. Charlie Kirk spent his whole life in books, but never in the real world, because he started his super PAC with the help of Koch brother funding at 21 years old. So that's self-determination. That's what that is. Boy, Koch brothers are always good at helping people be self-determined as long as they're saying exactly what they want to say. So we started this Turning Point USA, right? Charlie Kirk, now he's only 24 years old, young guy. Totally oblivious to the real world. I've seen an interview of him on David Rubin. Totally oblivious to the real world. Has no idea how the real world actually works. He's never lived in it. He's been propped up since his youth. Around the time Candace Owens got hired, Turning Point USA came under controversy. Turning Point USA's national field director, literally the person who was de facto the boss. She was the de facto boss. So Charlie Kirk was the face, obviously the founder, but this was the national field director, and she was what was described by the employees as a de facto boss of Turning Point USA. Do you know what text message she sent out? I don't want to misquote her. Because this is a... I hate black people. Like, fuck them all. I hate blacks. End of story. That was by Crystal Clayton, who was the national field director. I'm going to repeat that. I need y'all to understand. This is from his national field director, people. I hate black people. Like, fuck them all. I hate blacks. End of story. That's according to an employee from Turning Point USA. The text messages got leaked. Now, after this was exposed, Kirk was forced to fire Crystal. This is how Kirk described her. Crystal is an integral part of the success of Turning Point USA. While serving as its chief operating officer. We need more crystals in this world. This is her boss that she has been praising. Candace Owens has been praising this man who said we need more crystals. The same Crystal who said, I hate black people, fuck them all. Not some of them, not the ones who get on her nerve, all of them. All of them. She was hired within 30 to 45 days of this controversy blowing up. Notice how, if you had watched the Joe Rogan interview, notice how Joe Rogan always takes little jabs at her. Nothing crazy. But little jabs. Funny, calling him goofy, making fun of his tweets, and some things that he has said are a little weirdly problematic. Like the tweet about the Memorial Day tweet where he was talking about the unemployment of black people, which actually he wasn't even correct about that, by the way. But Joe Rogan isn't that bad. When it comes to he doesn't mind Trump. He thinks he's funny. He doesn't think he's as bad as a person as people think he is. So if he says something, you can usually take it lightheartedly. Candace Owens totally sidestepped it and immediately went into attacking Hillary Clinton and Bill Clinton and Obama. And she said, well, Trump is just a really likable guy, despite the things that he's been accused of. And Joe Rogan, who doesn't like Obama, mind you, said, that's cool. But isn't Obama a really likable guy? Even though you don't disagree with him, or that even though you don't agree with him, he gets attacked. Do you defend him in the same way? Because he's really likable. She's like, well, it's not the same thing. And she's like, wait a minute. Joe's like, wait a minute. No, he's a likable guy. That's the thing that made Obama the person he is. Now, here's what's scary. So you notice how people have made this huge fallacy trying to compare Trump to Hitler. I've always said that it's absolutely, utterly ridiculous. It is stupid. It is nonsensical. It is a gross misrepresentation, and it takes for granted it really is an insult to the experiences of people who had to live under that regime. And it also gives Trump way too much credit, making him more intelligent than he is. But she then does the same thing that the right hates the left doing. So they compare Trump to Hitler. So she says, I was sitting at this meeting with these Cubans, and while Obama was talking, his voice, the perfect inflections, his hand gestures, somebody started having a PTSD attack from whenever Fidel Castro used to speak, said he spoke exactly like Fidel Castro. I'm not saying he is like Fidel Castro, but I'm just saying this person said that like he was like Fidel Castro and he lived to see Fidel Castro. So like, yeah, I think that's what he was saying. Like, did you just Obama is bad for a lot of reasons. First of all, Fidel Castro is not the person you think he is, nor was he the ruler you thought he was. And you even admitted you know zero about Cuba and its conflicts with the United States. Literally. You admitted it. You premised with, I know nothing about this, so let me talk about it. Because you refuse to do one thing, Candace, and this is how I know this is partially because of, like I said, the lack of ability to rationalize your experiences and turn that into a learning point, instead of saying, because I experienced A, this must mean B for everyone who was against me or everyone who was for me. But also, it shows that you are incapable. I'm not saying this maliciously. But you are incapable of discussing nuance unless it is something that you are personally affected by, or have someone somebody that you love, a friend, family member, that is affected by that issue, like prison reform. For you, everything has to be A or B. But what you don't understand is that people, Candace Owens, has been active online for quite some time. Like I said, while she was bashing Trump in 2015 through 2016, no one knew who she was. Which is surprising because pretty much everybody who bashed Trump got super popular. It's a different discussion. But the moment it went from blasting Trump or attacking Trump to attacking black people, all of a sudden everybody knows who you are. And then Charlie Kirk, who openly praised a racist and said there should be more of them in this world, brings you on to his Koch-funded conservative nonprofit that is closely tied to the Trump campaign, to the point where Trump Jr.'s wife holds luncheons for them. Now everybody knows who you are because you've been trashing black people, but nobody knew who you were before that, which is a shame because I feel like your experiences are legitimate. I'm not delegitimizing anything that you went through, but the results of them have become a little bit more than disastrous because the man started a black outreach fund and put your face at the front. A black outreach that he had never previously cared about until he was accused, or his organization was accused, seemingly rightfully so, of being black or being racist, excuse me. Now here's where it gets even more ironic and interesting. Candace Owens, staunch fighter of systemic racism. Now, I'm not saying she's a fighter as in she's trying to combat it. What I mean is that anybody who says systemic racism exists is a liar. They just need to get the Bible back in schools. They need to, that bullshit. We just need more Jesus in schools. Well, did you know that most of the terrorists have been white, Christian, right-wing people? Yeah, but nah, Jesus. Joe Rogan was like, I think it's a mental health issue with guns, which I think most of the country is pretty much leaning towards. Not Candace Owens, though. It's not enough Jesus in school. I wonder where she got that from. Come on, people. has to be right. She said, I don't know a lot about climate change. I don't know anything about it. Then she proceeded to formulate an opinion saying that climate change doesn't exist at all, which is silly. It's just simply silly. You can argue about the nuances of climate change, but it's silly. It truly is silly to believe that climate change doesn't exist. You can argue whether it's man-made, but to say it doesn't exist is laughable. Your organization is Koch brothers funded. Okay? They were under investigation for trying to sway not only federal elections and state elections, but also funneling money into school organized university elections. You know who the face, like the people on the website that they were touting on Turning Point USA? Ted Cruz and Marco Rubio, two of the biggest Koch brothers stooges in the entire Senate. But what's more emblematic of your inability to address any issues, any stances, any ideology with legitimate objective nuance is the fact that you repeatedly talk about the Democratic plantation. Always. But you refuse to address the Republican plantation that you were on. That is more indicative of your need to fit in, of your inability to see politics for what it is. And it's also really representative of your naivety, because you've just gotten actually involved in politics. So you're not really aware of how black people are used on both sides. It isn't just Democrats. It isn't just Republicans. And many of you know that I have always said this. I have always said this. Even in journalism, people, even damn near, especially in journalism, if I am not going to be Sean King and constantly complain about how black people are getting murdered, without offering solutions, by the way, but that's a different discussion. But if I'm not Sean King complaining about how black people are getting murdered, or, Joyanne Reed, who always complains about Trump and always defends Obama and always defends the Clintons and everything is sexist and everything is racist, when I'm in that in-between side, I'm not very useful to anybody's narrative. Tim Black, same thing. When we have to say things like, it's not really racist, double back, wait a minute, you're overreacting. But at the same time, can also say, yeah, that clearly is racist, and we should discuss that further to make sure that we don't have to deal with that type of behavior again, or help people understand why it was wrong, why people were offended. Now, Candace Owens also claims to be part of that, to be part of the group that hates outrage culture. I just hate it. I'm just too real. That's what she said. I hate it. I'm just too real for outrage culture. I don't get outraged. Candace? When Colin Kaepernick and his colleagues decided to take a knee, you said they should all be fired, while simultaneously, well, not simultaneously, but subsequently saying that I can't believe how outrageous the left is over Roseanne's tweets. So someone should be fired for exercising their First Amendment rights, especially in the face of propaganda, because the only reason that players are even required to go out during the national anthem is because the Department of Defense paid them to, out of their recruiting budget, billions of dollars, by the way, out of their recruiting budget, to ensure that those players go out and look all patriotic. It has been confirmed that President Trump tried to use his political office to crush free speech. Oh, free speech of independent contractors, by the way. But instead of saying, you know what, I disagree with them, which is something that I'm capable of. I think that a lot of people are capable of it. Joe Rogan, who is somebody that I've actually come to admire over the last year or so. I used to think that he was on the right, like way more right-leaning than he is. I think he's probably libertarian left, if anything. But he acknowledged racism. But when that situation happened, it was, mind you, this is the same woman who understands and says that prison reform and like police brutality is a thing, said that those players should have been fired for taking a knee. Instead of just simply saying, I disagree with them. However, it is their First Amendment right. And if you are a constitutionalist, like most establishment conservatives claim to be, like Ted Cruz, for example, then above all else, you defend the rights of those you disagree with before you defend the rights of those you agree with. Above all else. That's the only way that our rights are maintained. That's why the First Amendment was created. But you were very quick to defend Roseanne Barr. I'll give you another example. She was talking about like how many black people. She was like, there's so many black people in Philly. They're like 44% black people in Philly. I have to look for white people. I look for them all the time. It's a really weird place to be. It's like, okay, that's really weird to start off the conversation with, whatever. But so she was talking about the Starbucks thing, and like I said, I've seriously come to admire Joe Rogan because he calls a spade, and I feel the same way as he does about a lot of things. Actually, he said, if that were me or two white guys, do you think that they would have been? Because he said, we don't know if it was racist. He said that. I agree with him. We don't know. But here's the part we do have to acknowledge. He said, if those are two white guys, would they have gotten? Well, I don't know. We can't know. He said, exactly. You're right. So how do we know it's not racism? I'm not saying that it is. I'm not saying that it isn't. But how are you so sure that it is not racism? Because you can, use a Socratic method to get down to a lot of things. Well, I don't know if he said that's all. That is legitimately for somebody like myself, like Joe Rogan, and people who think very similar to us, depending on the situation. I don't want you to agree with me all the time. That's not what I'm asking. What I am asking you to think about is, what if you're wrong? Who stands to lose more from being right and not actually having that acknowledged? Do white males, for example, need Candace Owens to defend them? No, obviously, like, I'm not in the camp of people, all white males are bad. No, so don't fucking get butthurt. A lot of guys do get really, really, really butthurt, which is really weird, by the way, because these are the same people who are quick to talk about what black people need to do with themselves. And then if a black person says that about a white person or a white male specifically, it's like, everything's my fault. Black people sold slaves too. You know who I'm talking about. Black people sold slaves. No, West Africans sold slaves, and then deep into Africa, actually, as an aside, deep into Africa, they had indentured servants that weren't based off of race. It was just a thing. There weren't that many jobs. Indentured servitude was pretty popular. In West Africa, they did sell slaves. But do you know what states are in, or what countries are in West Africa? Like Algeria, Morocco, states that were on the slave route, and also, coincidentally enough, kind of bordering Europe, like right there where Spain and France are, and also pretty white. If you gotta understand the history of the region, but like that's why Moroccans speak French. These were also, for all intents and purposes, white people. They helped sell slaves. So that conversation kind of got really derailed somewhere along the way. Somebody said, yeah, Africans also sold slaves, but they leave the part out where there's like a rich, like for all intents and purposes for Africa, white Arab people who sold slaves. That's not the same thing. in either way has nothing to do with what happened in this country. Nothing to do with it. Like, it didn't have anything to do with redlining still be alive, being around in the 80s, for example. So my point is, however, that who stands more to lose from you being wrong or right, Candace? If a white male accidentally gets called a racist, and that because of how he treated a black person, and maybe it was really malicious, but it wasn't because he was racist, does that white male stand more to lose than the two black people who will now have their experience delegitimized? Because it looks to me, now correct me if I'm wrong, based off of Candace Owens' experiences, she is actually much quicker to sympathize with the abuser instead of the abused. Off of her own admission, by her own experiences, she literally went on for about 30 minutes about how bad she felt for these kids who called her a nigger and said they were going to shoot her in the back of the head like they did MLK. It's a fact. So your disdain with being optically a victim comes from you actually being a victim. Maybe I'm naive, but you said it yourself. Being victimized, legitimately a victim of racism, where they threatened your life, being heckled and being called a liar, saying that you were lying about the situation in order to have a politician's son protected. And then the lives of those teenage/adults were hurt because of what happened, and you were blamed for that. Being a victim in that scenario obviously affected you enough that was the first thing that you opened up with on Joe Rogan's show. And it ruined your life. It made you anorexic. You know, like, that's what she said. But it has become very clear, in my humble opinion, that you are not for leaving the plantation. You are for being part of the side that has not really accepted you, or that you've had trouble being accepted in. You said yourself that you were called, that you were always trying to act white. You said it yourself that the turning point of your life was at the same time that you were bullied by the left establishment, but also ushered in to upper middle class to wealthy, rich, right, white. Like, by way of your boyfriend. So the side that you got accepted by versus the side that broke you down and called you a liar and all that good stuff, that's the side you went for. But you never call out the Republican establishment, which is really weird. And the fact that you're Coke funded, the fact that you got made literally the black face of the conservative movement, literally, you're getting Ben Carsoned, but even worse. The fact that people walk around saying, "Oh, a beautiful black woman conservative." You know why all three of those things are a big deal? Well, a beautiful black woman conservative. Well, not the beautiful part, but the black female conservative comments is because they're even in disbelief that you can sound so intelligent but be so far off in your analysis. And for someone to claim or not, well, you claim that systemic racism isn't real, that it could not possibly affect jobs, possibly affect the outcome of economics for black people. I'll give you a small micro example that you should probably be able to understand because it happened in your very company. You just learned, or we learned in November, that the national director of your company, of the nonprofit that you work for, literally hated black people. Not my words, hers, via text message. So how many black people, if there were black conservatives out there that wanted to work for her, that wanted to get pulled up into the ranks of Turning Point USA, which, by the way, there are none outside of Candace Owens. If they wanted to get hired and get promoted and things like that and thought they saw a future, this woman who said, I hate all black people, fuck them all, you think that she would do it? Do you think that she would promote them? Do you think she would give them power? Give them clout? Give them responsibilities? I'm going to give you a hint. I hate black people, like fuck them all, I hate blacks, end of story. No, she would not. She would not give them. That is how systemic racism works. That is how the prison industrial complex works. You're thinking of things in a macro level. And you even said yourself, you started out by saying black people are extremely strong-willed. We are. Extremely self-determined. We are. Extremely independent. We are. All those things are true, but then you go around saying black people victimize themselves. Mind you, okay, she spent almost an hour of Joe Rogan's podcast complaining about how she was the victim of X attack, like of this attack from this person on the left, this attack from that person on the left, this attack from that off of inflammatory things that she said on Twitter. But the time that she was legitimately a victim, that she had her life threatened while racial slurs were hurled at her, people, she says, I feel bad for those kids though, because, you know, is that really racist? And Joe Rogan's like, mind you, this is the one who hates outrage culture. He complains about it all the time. He was like, yeah, but that's kind of racist, don't you think? They said they're going to shoot you in the back of the head like Martin Luther King. It's kind of racist. But not really, though. It was a joke. They said purposely inflammatory things to literally make you feel like your life is under duress because you're black and you feel bad for them. While claiming Roseanne Barr should have never been fired, and it's because she didn't even know she was black. I believe her. Making all kinds of excuses for that. Like, y'all know how I feel about the Roseanne situation. I think that was like it was blown out of proportion. What she said was inappropriate, but it could have been a learning experience. But instead, we reacted while people like Joanne Reed get to walk off scot-free on her high horse after saying a bunch of inflammatory things about homosexuals. So you know how I feel about that. But the problem with that is I'm consistent. She is not. Because, once again, claimed that Colin Kaepernick and everyone else who was kneeling should have been fired. Where is the consistency? And the only consistent thing that I see personally is the need to be accepted because of your traumatic past. And to what seemed to me, because you've never described him, a past that was that no male role had a part in outside of your uncles who were in prison, which is why you take the prison industrial complex so personally. And the male roles that you did have were your boyfriends, who are all upper middle class white guys. And then the Charlie Kirks of the world, who you have infinitely more life experience than, but you're claiming that he is just the smartest guy you've ever met because he read some books and he's 24 years old and never went to college and got funded by the Koch brothers. You gotta wake up. You gotta wake up. You do. Because once you get to a certain point, it's your responsibility to start saying, okay, look, I made a mistake. But Jesus Christ, this is not right. You're not right about the black community. Black community does the opposite of victimize themselves. In fact, every time we try to pull ourselves out, You wanna know what happens? Look up Black Wall Street. Look what happened to them. Look up the Wilmington Massacre. Look what happened to them. Look up Berkeley, California. Look what happened in that situation. I mean, look what happened when we tried to vote during Jim Crow. As recent as, what, the 80s? Mid-80s? So redlining, if you don't know, was the inability for anybody of color or people who lived in dominantly black neighborhoods to pull out mortgages, second mortgages, even get approved for a house loan, take out business loans. You couldn't do it. Which is why black people in those neighborhoods don't own anything there, unless they are from out of the country. But a lot of people there should be an ongoing joke about black credit. Yeah, it's not a joke. It was called the Metro credit rating. And this was all while redlining was happening. Nixon fired people. Richard Nixon fired people for trying to implement the new anti-redlining laws. Second mortgages are used as business loans, used to pay for school, college, used to buy a car. We had no access to these things as literally as early as the late 80s. Candace, you and I were both born 88, 89. Our parents, respectively, would not have been able to drink at the same water fountain. And you thought that all those people who were racist, who were trying to pass these laws, who were okay with these laws, who said nothing about these laws, just died off? That they didn't have kids? No, black people don't victimize themselves. In fact, oftentimes when they find success, it is in spite of racism, not in the absence of racism. Or like yourself, when you're finding success, even though you've had multiple ventures, the first time that you got seen wasn't for their appreciation of your anti-bullying movement, which was respectable. A little bit, the execution was kind of weird. You probably shouldn't go around doxing people, but you were young when you started that, so it's different. I get it. You thought it was a good idea, but not when you were, anti-Trump, whatever. But the moment you start shitting on black people, now the world knows who you are. Now everybody jumps to your defense. You're the beautiful black young conservative woman, not just the really intelligent, beautiful woman. You never critique the Republicans, always critique the Democrats as if they're not both as bad. And they are. Democrats, Soros, Republicans, Koch brothers, no difference. I don't think Trump is the most evil man in the world. Like I said, I know he's not Hitler, but I can critique him when necessary. But you totally avoid it because the Koch brothers will not allow you to, because Turning Point USA is owned by them, or because you don't want to lose your fan base. You literally how do you go from I hate Trump with everything in my being, in the same year I love Trump with everything in my being? It doesn't matter if you like or hate Trump. Any sane person would rationalize that as, okay, you got issues, or you're fishing for attention, or you're fishing for money, or all three. But I don't hate you. I understand it. It doesn't make it okay. And I truly hope that you watch this so that you can actually listen and understand where I'm coming from, because I am someone like you. I wasn't called like a white boy, but I was called like Asian kid. People thought I was half Korean for almost all of high school and well into my adult life. And I get what it feels like to be on the outside and not be accepted. But we're all limited to our experiences. But eventually, You have to take responsibility and accountability. Thank you all so much for tuning in. I would love to hear your thoughts and comments on this. So please comment below. Tag people you think would be interested in this conversation. Let's talk about this on Twitter. I would be interested to hear what you all have to say about this. I'd be interested to hear what Candace has to say about this. Like I said, this video was not made with malicious intent. It was me saying to her, I understand. I get it. You were treated wrong multiple times by both sides of the fence. But it's time for you to stop playing victim, because that's what you're doing. With all that being said, always remember, more than anything else, especially you, Candace, find your balance. Peace.